Bonjour. Welcome to the Izhitwaawin podcast. We're here in Redby, Minnesota, in the Red Lake Nation. My name's Alexander Amin, and today, who's here?
Anin Nenookaasi, from Leech Lake Nation.
Hello, my name is Courtney Barrett, and I work at Red Lake Chemical Health as a prevention specialist.
Today we're gonna be talking about wild rice. A lot of people know about wild rice in the sense of maybe it's something that they eat. You can get wild rice in a lot of different ways here in Minnesota. But a lot of people don't know where it comes from or all the steps that go into it, why it's important to Red Lake culture, why it's important to Ojibwe culture, why it's important to American Indian culture. And so we want to talk about that today. And so we invited our friend here, and we wanted to see what do you know about wild rice?
I know it's very integral to the Ojibwe people, that it's pretty much our defining agriculture and defining piece of our culture, all the way down from our creation story to modern people today. That it's the backbone, it's a staple of who we are.
And so where did you find wild rice for the first time? Like in the sense of, did somebody teach you a way into wild rice?
It was definitely like a born into it, I guess. First rice memory, I guess, would be in like the winter months. We lived in the HUD housing, and the ventilation's really bad in those houses. So if you like take a shower, like you boil a pot of water, the walls just start to breathe and they get like really damp. And I remember coming in shoveling snow, and the whole house would smell and be damp with like rice water boiling. You could smell it throughout the whole house as soon as you come in. And so I guess that's like my first memory with wild rice, is that a very wholesome memory. I didn't think it'd be as defining as it is now, but that smelling of the kettle and smelling rice while it's boiling just kind of reminds me of that. But when I got really involved in it, I think might have been like 10 or 12 years old. And I wanted some better school clothes, and I wanted to buy like the obnoxious like starter clothes and like the Nikes and the G-Unit hoodies and like the Slim Shady stuff. And Mom wasn't gonna buy that. You had to use your own money to buy that. And I was like, "Well, Mom, I'm like 10. How am I gonna get some money?" She said, "We'll go out with the rice bed with your uncle. You know, if you get up in time, you can go do it." And so I agreed to it, and she put me out into the brush with a pair of rice knockers. And she said, when you can knock the leaves off without breaking the branches, you can go out on the rice bed. And so I got the motions down for it and the sweeping motion of it. And she brought me out on the canoe, and I found out I was a better knocker than puller, because I went every direction except for forward. I went like left, right, backwards. She had to pull for me and like get out and push a couple times because I just got us stuck.
So I want to ask you about So did you ever hear about the migration story?
Mm-hmm.
Long time ago, about us moving west, where what did they say, where their food grows on the water?
Yep.
Yeah, you heard about that?
Oh yeah, word for word that.
Yeah. Can you share that with us?
What I was told is that a messenger came out of the waters. We used to live on the East Coast around where Maine to Maryland.
Just a little bit closer to the mic.
We used to live around Maine or around Maryland. They found the Miga shells, and they found artifacts that match us out there. And they said that a prophecy came out of the water that said that there's going to be a cataclysm coming. And if we want to survive it, we have to move west and follow the sun till where we find that the food grows on water. And so a bunch of tribes took off, and they started migrating west. And every different tribe made a different stop for whatever reason it was. They couldn't go on, or they had dreams that this is where they wanted to be at. And those different tribes dot the Great Lakes region. So the Senecas, Iroquois, the Hurons, Potawatomis, and all throughout that region are sister tribes, and they make up the Algonquin people. And so those people are all like semi-related through culture and through history through that way.
Yeah, that's what I was told too. The Mika show and the prophecy and us having a dream about it, and that's how we came to northern, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
And that's where people always say that like we're fighting with the Sioux. What I was told is that they were already here when we migrated over, and that's where the first beef happened, and that they gifted us the big drum and the word Ogeechee, the whole word itself. They gifted us that title because they acknowledged that how bad we wanted to live here, and they moved over for us, and that was the whole peace thing between that.
So, kind of from the, so you found out you weren't a polar, you weren't a pusher. Kind of talk us through like how the relationship to wild rice and yourself like progressed and changed over the years from that first kind of learning.
I had a racing partner. He was a couple years older than me, and we'd both go out there because he also wanted to make some extra money. And no one gave a damn about a 10 and a 15-year-old out there getting like 60 pounds of rice. No one cared about that. So I would race with him for a good while, and then as we got older, we both had separate lives, and he ended up having more kids and starting a life on that side. And so I just didn't want to find a new racing partner. I didn't want to be out in the rice bed with somebody for 8 hours and just be kind of annoyed with them. You got to have a lot of trust and a lot of a partnership with your racing partner. So you got to be out there. And so at some point we'll get back out there. I think I might find a new partner, but we'll see how that goes. But so then I wasn't racing on the rice bed anymore. But I was with a couple of programs that my family was with, and we got a phone call one day if we wanted to go out and do it. Or actually before that was at the Leech Lake Tribal College. My and Bob Jourdain was leading a rice demonstration, teaching how to do an old kettle style. And I was just asked, do you want to come out there and hang out? And I said, sure, I'll come, do this and that. And they showed us jigging, they showed us the parching, showed us winnowing and how to do all that. It was like a couple weeks later, my mom got a phone call, is he over there? And do you remember how to do the ricing stuff? I was like, you mean with the kettle and stuff that I did with Bob? And yeah, do you remember how to do all that? Yeah, of course, I just did it. Can you come up to Itasca Park like all day, and can you be here in like an hour? I was like, oh my God. Yeah, sure, I'll come up there. And they do a program with the University of Minnesota where they teach a lot of their different incoming freshmen. They take their first weekend off of university living and they come up north and they learn about the traditional wild rice stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's very profound about what these young people learn about taking that first week of their lives off of like that and coming to learn what we grew up with. It completely changes them about the things that they see and the things that they do. It just really, it's interesting. It's crazy to see the young people from different cultures gravitate towards our teachings and pull so much from it.
Growing up in HUD housing, do you think that wild rice was like a staple in like the diet? Was it like something that you relied on?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. It's the simple meals now that I miss when I come home and I eat again and I realize that it's like, man, that's really good. And it's just like rice, potatoes with like cream of mushroom and a pork chop. Like that's that's killer. And that's like, you don't think about that kind of thing when you're away from home, doing work and away from the lodge basically. You don't realize how much you miss that simple little taste of like what you used to know.
Do you think that the process of wild ricing, any aspect of that, do you think that process could have healing capabilities in it? Like, is it possible to heal while you're out there in the sun, getting smoked by mosquitoes? Like, is it possible to heal?
Oh yeah, for sure out there. Through the rice bed, through just being around the rice, the stock, the cooked rice, and cooking the rice. Even just parching and finishing it, whether you're doing it old style way with a kettle or an oar, or if you're using machinery, even just being around it really puts you in a kind of like an indigenous state of mind of thinking about everything. So it definitely helps out with that for sure.
When, I, when I was out there, it was like, you're busy because I'm a polar. I like to pole. And when I was out there, it felt like almost like meditating, you know? But you're busy, but you're still, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. You're out there with your partner and it's just quiet, and then you can hear all that rice falling onto the canoe, and I call it dancing. The rice is dancing, and that's a beautiful sound, man. I like it.
My mama said that they're child spirits. Each grain of rice is a child spirit, and that when we're out there, we're encouraged to sing with them and to dance with them and to share good thoughts with them, and to think of the wild rice crop that we're harvesting and that we're out there with as a child spirit. So we want to sing and dance with them as much as we can out there, and that encourages playing with the rice and dancing with the rice and putting your hands through it. Even just doing that knocks it off of the stalk and helps seed out the next patch for next year.
Yeah.
The next following years.
Like if it doesn't make it in the canoe, that little grain, it's gonna grow up. But yeah.
It for sure. A lot of things I've noticed with teaching these things is when people are parching, I tell them to slow down with what they're doing. When they first start, they really rush with the oar when they're parching. And they're acting like I'm not going to throw more rice in. And I tell them all that, like, you have to break the idea that this is work, that this is what you're going to do for the day.
Yeah.
So to slow down with the rice, you're taking care of a child spirit. Be really gentle with it while you're mixing it. And you can see the physical reaction on them when I'm explaining this to them. The sound of it swishing in the kettle mixed with, like, the smells of it, and just them hearing it and thinking differently now. You can see a physical change in them. All of a sudden, it's like they're open to a whole new world of learning and experience.
That's cool.
Courtney, where did you go wild ricing this year?
Secret.
I mean, like,
No, I just
without
kidding.
being too specific.
No, I don't want to share. But we went up to the northwest angle, up by Lake of the Woods up there, and it was Young's Bay, and man, that bed, I swear it was like a football field of nothing but rice.
Nice.
So we were in and out, zigzagging, still filling up the canoe with rice, but it was I had a blast up there.
Who'd you go with? Who was kind of taking you underneath their wing?
Who did I go with that? Who was my racing partner?
Yeah.
Yeah, his name is Kevin Hart. That's Jason Hart's, I want to say older brother. But yeah, he was my racing partner this year.
And was he kind of teaching you the way? Was it? Are you still learning?
Yeah, I'm still learning. I'm actually, I want to say 4 or 5 years into racing. But yeah, I'm still learning, so, and I try to knock. I try to knock and stuff, but it seems like I'm better with the pole, and so I consider myself a polar.
What kind of things did you see when you're out there? You in kind of like a remote place?
Yeah, there's nothing out there, just you and the rice and the woods and, a little bit of water, other racers out there. Like there was Tom, Mo, Jason, Raymond, Brian. But there was other people out there too that we didn't know. Just we'd run across paths with them and be like, "Hey, what's up?" Look in their canoe and be like, "Oh, you guys are getting a nice haul too." There's enough rice for everybody.
It's almost like noise dampening out there. If it's just you and your canoe, like you almost don't hear around you. If it's thick enough, you don't hear.
Yeah, for sure, man.
They're all of a sudden up on you, or you're behind them, and all of a sudden, almost crash.
Yeah.
So, I I met Logan at the Megwayak Trail in Leech Lake, Cass Lake area at the at first the Head Start program for like real young kids, like super young youth. And it's this trail where it's an educational experience. There's all sorts of different teachings going on, whether it's how to fillet walleye for the first time, how to make salves out of different leaves, like the plantain leaf, how to, eating venison, looking at deer skulls, beadwork, all sorts of really cool things, wild ricing being one of them. And Logan was teaching the wild ricing class, basically. Is it okay if I call you Logan?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, cool. And basically, I was watching Logan do all the different steps of wild ricing and processing it, whether it's the parching, the winnowing, and one thing that really kind of stuck out to me was how you talked about songs and rhythms involved with these different processes. You talked about almost hearing like the history, like hearing the people that came way before us and like being connected to them in these different steps.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk more about that?
So it's part of, especially I like to do at the university, with the University of Minnesota students. It's really, I like to try and break the thought process of this colonized thinking that we have. And in order to do that, you have to put your spirit and the way it's thinking almost back to the original settings, like almost back to factory settings. And you first have to get like a glimpse of that into like a time machine. I tell the university kids that we can time travel here if they want, and we can go back to a time back when this would be your everyday experience. And I would tell them the noises you're hearing, the smells that you're hearing, the thoughts that you're having. This is your day. There's no work, there's no 40 hours. This is what you're doing for the day, and that's going to be it. And you can see the whole group again, they have that reaction of their mind gets ready to be able to not think outside of a lifestyle that depends on a 9 to 5 or whatever it may be. Our people never quite thought of what we were doing as work, per se. Like, I remember hearing about like my uncles and everybody, they would do like a lot of the strenuous stuff, like wood cutting or like a lot of heavy lifting things during the beginning of the day. And then towards the end of the day would be more of the meticulous things like crafting or woodworking or the things like that, things that were more meticulous. And even just having that kind of attitude and thought process of how you're going to approach your work day, even that is just how it breaks you from that frame of mind and gets you into more of an indigenous thinking. Because now you're not quite thinking of, oh, this is another day I'm done. This is just another day for me. And it kind of relieves the anxieties that you get with most of like having a work day or having a workload for the day.
So you were jigging and your friend came up with the drum. What is that relationship? What is that connection?
His name is James. I met him at the previous Wild Rice camp, not this year, but the year before that at the University of Minnesota. And he just kind of jumped in with me at the parching pit. He just kind of grabbed the ore, or he grabbed the rice bag, or he'd make sure that the fire's stoked. And he'd just kind of hang around and just kind of be there. And this next Wild Rice camp happened, and he did the same thing. He just kind of jumped into his place and just kind of knew where to fit in. And was hanging out with me and learning how to do parching and learning how to do jigging and interacting with the students and bringing them a lot more too, helping me out with that and helping teach them. And so at the end of that camp, I gave him a knife and I kind of said, if you want to kind of be on the team and keep being with me on this, I kind of want you to be with me too. It was about the same age he is. He's about 13, 14. And it was about that age too. I ended up going to a lot more of these cultural events, and it wasn't. It was just kind of like how you were raised, kind of thing. I was just always there around that age and kind of took things on. But he's running into this stuff head first, and he wants to learn more about it, and it satisfies him, and he likes being around the culture and learning like that. And so I just said, okay, well, when the trail asked me, I can't pronounce it right now, they asked me to come out there and do a demonstration with them, I instantly said he's got to come with me then, because he's got to, this is an event with him that he's doing, and he was perfect last time we did this, so he came out with me on that. And it's just perfect to have him out there too, because it kind of parallels how I was taught at that age too.
And Logan, what is the relationship between the rate at which you jig and somebody with the drum?
It's a lot of trick songs, a lot of dancing. It's harder to describe at the camp because it's just us and one drum. But during that days before colonization, when we still had our rice camps, it would be 4 or 5 people on a jig pit, or there'd be 3 or 4 jig pits set up, and it'd be a whole entire group of drums. And it would be just a good game to have. You try and beat the song, the singers would try and come up with a rhythm or a song that would stop the dancers. And it would just be one part to help pass the time, and then one part just to get down. A lot of our stuff was just, that was the day. Might as well sing a good song with it. It wasn't always work too. We knew how to have fun. So there'd be stop songs, slow songs. They'd get faster in rhythm. They'd get slower in rhythm. False stops, false starts. It would just be a good way to pass the time and have fun with everybody. Our people knew how to work differently. Our whole approach to all of that was just so... When you're working with a good crew full of natives, it's a good day. It's just hard to describe. I've worked in separate crews with all sorts of different people here and there throughout Minnesota, and it's just always, there's a couple of natives on the crew that are good workers. It's a better day for some reason.
No, I hear you.
When you were talking about a sound while winnowing, multiple people winnowing at once. What do you think about when you think about that?
It's a weird, like, melancholy almost. What you're referring to is when I was explaining with the winnowing baskets, there's a process where you do larger sweeps with the basket, and then that clears up more debris, and then you do smaller, shorter sweeps with the basket, almost like you're panning for gold, and then these tiny little jigs, almost like you're shivering, and that helps get rid of the rest of the dust. And you work your way down from these large sweeps, and then it goes slower or faster, and it goes really fast. And the part of it is that the sadness kind of part of it is you can imagine that at some point there must have been some songs that went along to that rhythm. Somebody working there all day must have came up with some kind of song to sing with that. There's no way we sat there all day just quietly, just listening to that over and over and over. There's no way we did that. It's impossible. So, and then you could imagine that song with like 16 to 20 other baskets all repeating the same noise, and then they're all singing the same song together. And just those kind of images in your head and your imagination and your mind can put it together that this used to happen, that this, at one point in time, this was there. And like, we're trying to slowly revive it. You realize that you're reviving it. You realize really that like, you're bringing back something that was lost. The idea and the concept that, multiple people were doing this one thing that I'm showing to other people, and they're taking so much from it, but I was just raised by it. It's just this weird concept of, man, it's a revival. You really understand what you're doing out there when you start seeing that, and you start hearing that, and breaking down those concepts. And it's crazy that when you're describing this to a lot of those younger people out there, they understand what you're saying with this, too. They follow me with everything that I just told you guys. They follow me word for word, and they can figure it out. And they can get where they stand in that point of creation. They understand at that point, and then they're open for all sorts of different things. they start dancing at powwows and stuff. It's crazy.
If you if you decided today that it was your mission to figure out what songs were used in association with the winnowing, what would your first step be? Where would you start looking? How would you start asking?
I've heard rumors of some cassette tapes around the Mille Lacs region that may have some songs that pertain to wild rice. There would have to be a lot of almost archival digging. Because even when I brought that up to some of my elders around me, even they would be like, you sound like you're right. Like it sounds like a new thought to them. That there's a part of history that we haven't even quite thought about yet that was lost somewhere. It's an insane concept of you have to be open to those things too, I guess.
Why is wild ricing important?
In today's day and age, I think it becomes an economic value. I was explaining this to one of my friends I work with about how our idea of economics breaks down differently than what it would from a colonized mind, where you would bring home a check versus you bring home a deer. If they're both the same exact thing now, how do we break that down into the family values of that? So now if we replace the deer with a wild rice harvest, the wild rice harvest is now the equivalent of an income check. And then we break that down into the family value. That helps add an economic value to Ojibwe people and Native people that solely pertains to nothing but the Ojibwe people. Nobody else can touch or harvest our rice except for us, and I know that we're going to make sure of that. And so there's an economic commodity there that belongs to us and only us that we're going to be able to rely on, that people are relying on too. I know there's plenty of people that take pay time off of work or they flat out quit jobs just to go out and rice because it's easier to rice for 2 weeks straight and then get school clothes, school supplies versus having to work for 4 weeks in a month at some wherever.
What's the greatest threat to wild rice?
Any threat to our waters, I think, is the best threat to wild rice. I know there's been a lot of things up here in northern Minnesota where they drain certain beds and aquifers. They cracked into them for sure. When I say they, I say just a general statement. You can say all this stuff, but there's opposing factors that cracked into aquifers and they displaced a lot of our wetlands. And the wetlands are very crucial to having anything to do with wild rice. And if we start losing the waters, then our rice and our ecosystem within our marshes and swamps and rice beds and our riverbeds, those would be the first things to be affected. And then from there, it's going to go very downhill quickly. So protecting our waters up here is for sure a top priority.
Do you think that if more people went wild ricing, that more people would protect water?
Oh yeah, for sure. When you're out on the rice bed, you get to see the ecosystem that's out there, and you end up seeing that the rice worms and the spiders and even the most minuscule pieces of it fit to a whole entire bigger puzzle. And just being out there in that quietness that we were talking about earlier, that kind of meditative state where you're out there working, now you're almost in a sense approaching what I was talking about when I bring the university students through smelling the rice kettle and parching it and they're slowing it down now. You're almost imitating the same thing out there when you're pulling or knocking. It's clearing your mind of having to do, if anything, all you're doing is you're going to be out on the rice bed all day. You're going to just listen to the sounds of the rice bed. You're just going to hear what's out there. And it brings you into that meditative state where your anxieties kind of cool down. And it opens you up into a similar state of, like what I was talking about with the university students that I work with, where it brings them into a state of openness. It parallels the two, and then just being out there and realizing like how much history you're interacting with, and exactly, it really helps focus you on who you are in like the whole realm of creation and the whole scheme of things, I guess. Just being out there in that meditative state working.
If you had a message, primary message to whoever that would be about wild ricing or wild rice, what would you want people to know how would you want them to feel about wild rice?
Mm, I would definitely want them to know a little bit more about the history of it, and that there is I guess, a cultivated rice that's out there that's known amongst the general population beyond Native America that's very brittle. It's the paddy rice that I'm talking about. I would really like everyone to know that there's a difference between the paddy rice and the wild rice. That one is wild rice from native country, and then the other one is kind of like this synthetic. I don't know. How do you take the wild out of wild rice? Basically, they try and grow it like rice patties, and it doesn't work. It comes out just not right. Yeah, you have to get it authentic. I was in the West Coast, almost by Celilo, with my family doing some work with my dad, and we ran into a burger stand out there that was native owned, and he heard that we were Ojibways from Wild Rice Country, and he came out with a bag of wild rice that he had, and he said, "Yeah, I ordered this. Is this wild rice?" And it was like a rice medley of like white rice, well, Spanish rice, and every now and then there was a couple flakes of like gray, actual wild rice kernels. And we can't, like, that right there is the wild rice. That's what you're supposed to get. This is the actual rice kernel. All this other stuff is filler. Like, they didn't sell you what you're supposed. So I guess just even knowledge like that, just that there's a difference between actual wild rice and then there's cultivated paddy rice that's out there, because then it allows us to be able to keep in control of it if we own it and we own our identity with it. It doesn't let these other people come in with this paddy rice and this cultivated stuff. It lets us keep our name and keep our traditions into it. It doesn't let other people. Just like awareness, I guess.
I want to ask you one question. What do you know about Wike?
Wike? What I was told about it was a form of tobacco of the actual Asema. When we're out there praying, you see a lot of people handing out like top tobacco or just regular, the brown shredded up stuff. What I was told was that Wike is the actual tobacco plant that we would use here before they started cultivating it and before they started doing agriculture to our tobacco. Wike is the most closest thing to a tobacco that we have now.
Like Kinnikinnick?
Yeah, it's almost the same thing as, I don't want to say almost the same, but roughly along those same things. That Wike is roughly what you would use for your tobacco, for actual smoking within your pipe, not just using for hand prayer, I guess.
So I went and harvested. So Wike, aka bitterroot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I found. Well, I didn't find it. I was just filming the finding of Wike, and it can be found in like channels of, well, kind of like openings, specifically in Red Lake, on Red Lake, where the Tamarack River leaves the big lake or enters, but basically at a mouth. And it's like a root that's like an aquatic root, and like it looks kind of like ginger root, kind of, and it has like a gingery like potency. And like I was told that like it's basically kind of like used to almost like if we had like a Pepto-Bismol, like the OG Pepto-Bismol.
You're talking about Kinnikinnick, right? Or talking about Wike?
I'm talking about Wike.
Wike?
Or bitterroot.
I was just going to say
Did
bitter.
I have it switched then with Wike?
I think so.
I think I had it switched.
Yep.
Because I remember what you're talking about now, because I have had that before. My grandma has had that. And I do remember tasting it. It tastes bitter. It's rough.
Yeah.
There's like no flavor but bitter behind it. I think I might have had that mixed up though, because I remember there's what you were talking about, and then those are the natural tobacco, but they sound. I remember the K sound. Yeah, the red willow.
Because I was when you were describing what, to me it sounded like you were talking about Kinnikinnick, because like I know that was like, from what I know, was used in like tobacco mixes and stuff.
Yeah, it's the K sound that threw me off and mixed up. There's a lot there that you got to remember on that, and it's just so. The things with the medicines too is it's so fun to learn about just different things like that. Like I had it mixed up, but I remember hearing and smelling and tasting that. I don't want to mix it up again.
Yeah,
but
like
what
the bitterroot, the weak
bitter-
A.
Yeah, I remember tasting that now. And my mom and her friend were medicine people, and she's more of a gatherer. Her friend is more of out there in the woods, and she would bring that back. I remember tasting that now, and that's really. It's insane that we have so many of these medicines too that are like the equivalent, like you guys says, the equivalent of like Pepto-Bismol and stuff. Like we have so many of our own medicines and natural. I put it with my mom's friend. She can cure any kind of injury we could have got 1,000 years ago. Like if we bump on the head or a laceration or something like that. If it gets a little bit more than that, we have to do something else for you. But she's like the paramedic first aid kind of lady that we always like to go to in our family.
That's cool.
Sweet. Nice.
Thanks for tuning in to the Izhitwaawin podcast out of Redby, Minnesota. Once again, I'm Alexander Amin.
My name's Logan Clown.
I'm Courtney Barrett, and thanks for coming up here, Logan.
Miigwech. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Logan. Miigwech.